Hey everyone, happy Easter. My name is Andrew and I am so glad that you're joining with us. And today, as you can probably already tell, we have a very special service planned for our online audience, especially as you look out here, you know we are filming in a very special location. And so let me be one of the first people just to wish you happy Easter. And I want to begin today and just let you know off the bat that there will be a couple moments in this sermon where you probably wonder, you're like, Andrew, are you sure that this is an Easter message? And I'll tell you, if that's you during the message, I just want to tell you right now that yes, this is an Easter message. Just hang with me. And I want to begin today with one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. It's Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19, that says this: "We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure." I'm going to read that one more time, and this time from home, I want you to read with me. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Now, I didn't really grow up around boats, and so I got to be honest that I had no idea how important an anchor is to a boat. In fact, you know, when I think of anchor, I think of something that just like slows you down or a heavy weight, but I had no idea that an anchor is a life-saving instrument that every single boat is equipped to. In fact, recently I was talking to a buddy of mine who has a boat right here in this very same harbor, and he was telling me that he would never, ever leave the harbor without double checking that his anchor is firm and secure. I mean, he told me that his anchor is a life-saving instrument. It is one of the most vital, important pieces of his boat. An anchor is vital. An anchor doesn't just stop a boat, an anchor can save a boat. For example, recently I came across a story that I found fascinating. It is a disaster story, so I want to just let you know that, but I found it fascinating. It happened in 1904 on June 15th. It is known as the General Slocum disaster. Here's what happened. On June 15th, 1904, 1,300 people boarded the General Slocum on the East River outside of New York. Now, a couple of things. The East River is only 16 miles long and about 3,000 feet wide, so it is not some enormous body of water. On top of that, the General Slocum, it had a great captain, a great crew. In fact, it had recently just been serviced by the fire inspector and deemed fit to go out on any expedition. So here we are on this day, 1,300 people all dressed up, kind of like how we dress up for Easter. They all got on board the General Slocum on a beautiful, sunny day, and they had no idea that disaster was in store for them. Now, no one knows exactly how it started, but moments after leaving the dock, the General Slocum, a fire began and sprang up below the deck, a place where no one would see. And trust me, the irony is not lost on me that today, here I am, talking about a disaster in a small body of water with everyone dressed up, and here I am on Easter Sunday, dressed up here in a small harbor, also on a boat. So here's what happens. It's a beautiful day. No one has any idea that there is a fire springing up on this wooden ship right below deck. Now, of course, there were some warning signs. In fact, at one point, a 12-year-old kid ran up to some of the crew members and told them that he smelled smoke. Now, the crew had experience with kids trying to play pranks on them, and so this kid was immediately dismissed. A few minutes later, as they were still in the East River, so they're still close to shore, they passed by a mental institution. Now, some of the patients were outside in the sun on the beach, and some of the patients began to yell at the crew and the people on the General Slocum and yell, "Fire! Fire!" But as the crew looked at them, they realized that this is a mental institution, and these patients were certifiably insane. And so they smiled and nodded and said, "Okay," and continued on their journey, unaware that the fire was spreading below deck. Now, eventually, a few of the crew, they go below deck and they spot the fire, and immediately they, of course, spring into action. They run to the nearest fire hose, they start unfurling it, they turn on the water, but unfortunately, this is 1904. And so fire hoses back then were made of canvas, and so there is a kink in this fire hose, and when the water comes through it, it causes it to burst, rendering it completely useless. So one of the crew members runs to the opposite side of the ship, grabs the other fire hose, brings it over to re-hook it up, but some genius had installed two different types of fire hoses on each end of the ship, making it impossible to use this fire hose near the fire. So the fire is now spreading, the smoke is now coming up through the floor. People on deck are noticing that something is wrong. By this time, the captain is alerted, and he makes the decision to abandon ship. And so now there's a general panic, and people are making their way to the lifeboats. And the problem here is that a couple weeks before, the lifeboats had been newly painted for this journey. And unfortunately, they had been put back against the ship before they had fully dried, meaning these lifeboats were stuck to the side of the ship, and they were also now useless. So the crew now looks to the life jackets. They grab life jackets, begin handing them out. And again, 1904, it's different today, but in 1904, life jackets were filled with cork because cork is buoyant. Now, unfortunately, when cork is left out in the sun too long, cork turns into cork dust, and cork dust is not buoyant. Cork dust absorbs water. So, as the crew throws their first couple of life jackets into the water, they sink because they have turned into 60-pound weights. Now, all of this had happened in about 65 minutes, which is way longer than even this service. All of this had happened. The crew, the passengers, they're now all panicked. There is fire around them. Disaster has struck. Everything they've put their hope in has failed them. The fire hoses, the lifeboats, the life jackets, all of them have failed, and now they are in mortal danger. Disaster is all around them. I mean, imagine with me right now, you're going through life, everything seems fine, and then out of the blue, disaster strikes. You never saw it coming. And I'll tell you what, as a pastor, unfortunately, I see this happen all the time in people's lives. I see people who go in for a routine doctor's visit, and they think everything is fine, but then the doctor looks at a test, furrows their brow, and says, we need to run more tests. And then they hear a word they thought they would never, ever hear, the word cancer. And then their mind goes blank and they can't hear anything else because they are spinning out of control because they never saw this coming. Or I know people who have worked at a job for 20 plus years. They've put in extra hours. They believe in the company. They've worked hard. They've done their part. And then out of the blue, they receive a 2 weeks notice and they are let go. And now they're struggling financially. They're worried. They're anxious. Bills are coming due that they don't know how they're going to pay, and they're struggling because, again, they never saw it coming. Or some of you students who are watching this, you know exactly what this is like. You put in year after year of hard work. You did extracurricular activities. You did sports because there was one specific college that you desperately wanted to get into. You did your essays. You applied, and then you get the letter that says, thank you so much for applying, but unfortunately, we cannot accept you at this time. And you are crushed. You are devastated. You don't know what to do or where to turn because you never saw it coming. Or some of you, this is going to be helpful for you. Right now, you're going through your life and you got people on the sidelines of your life and they are shouting at you. They are trying to help you. They are warning you that disaster is coming. But you're like the people on the Slocum looking at the mental institution patients. You're like, okay, whatever, I'm fine, nothing to worry about. But you got people in your life that are just shouting like, be careful about that relationship, or be careful about how you are handling your finances or your health. They see a disaster is coming your way and you got no idea right now. And what you need to do is you need to take their advice seriously. Now, back to the Slocum. At this point, every safety precaution had failed, and so the captain is left with one of two options. He can take control. He can grab the wheel, steer the ship into the headwinds, and try to run it aground, or he can deploy the anchor. Deploying the anchor will give it a firm foundation, it will stop the ship, and then he can wait for rescue. And I'm guessing by now you already know what decision he made. The captain grabs the wheel, steers it into the headwinds towards shore that looked so unbelievably close. Unfortunately, as he steers into the headwinds though, he gives the fire unlimited oxygen. The fire erupts, consuming the ship, injuring people, some even lose their lives. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, Andrew, this is Easter. This is a day of egg hunts and pastel colors. Like, what are you doing? Why are you telling us this disaster story? Well, let me tell you, here's why. It's because I know that every single one of us, we will have a moment in our lives where disaster strikes, where we never see it coming, where we find ourselves in a crisis moment. Even Jesus himself said this. He said, in this world, you will have trouble. And you want to know, in the original Greek, what that word trouble means? That word means trouble. It means life will not go your way. Problems will arise. Issues will occur. Things that you never saw coming. Prices will rise. Wars will happen. People will hurt you, betray you. Things will happen that will break your heart. And so the question becomes, when a crisis enters our lives, when everything feels so unstable, what do you hold on to? What will be your anchor? Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Now, after the General Slocum disaster, of course, an investigation was launched. And while it is impossible to blame one person or one thing, the heartbreaking part of the findings was simply that if only the crew, if only the captain would have trusted in the anchor, if only they would have deployed the anchor to the firm foundation and just stopped feeding the fire and waited for other boats to come to their rescue, every person could have been saved. Even the Slocum could have been restored and repaired. So the question I have for you today is, what is your anchor? What are you putting your trust? What are you holding on to? Because one of the things we all know is that crisis is coming. Disaster will come when we least expect it. So what is your anchor? Some of you will remember this year, Bills safety Damar Hamlin. This 24-year-old was living his best life on a professional sports team, good at his job, he has money, his health, fame, everything most of us could ever want, until January 2nd, disaster would strike. All of those things would get ripped away in just a moment. It started as an ordinary Monday Night Football game. Middle of the first quarter, Hamlin makes this routine tackle, something he has done 10,000 times in his life. Except this time, he stands back up, stumbles, and then immediately falls to the ground. And if you watch this play happen like I did, you see for a couple of seconds, players, they just stand around. They're dumbfounded. They have no idea what's happening until they realize Hamlin, this 24-year-old kid, he's not breathing. In this freak, 1 in a million accident, Damar Hamlin goes into cardiac arrest. And you watch as paramedics, they rush onto the field, they administer CPR, and for 20 minutes, we as fans watch, wondering, will this young man even survive? We watch as these big, tough football players on the field, they break down. Some weep, some circle around to pray, some just stand in shocked silence, because no one saw it coming. It was supposed to be an ordinary game, and now a life is hanging in the balance. Now, fortunately, we know Hamlin has made an incredible recovery. He has exceeded every doctor's expectation for his recovery, but as he left that field on a stretcher, no one knew if he would be okay, if he would even walk again, or what would happen. And I'll tell you, in the hours after the injury, sports commentator named Wright, he shared his response to this unexpected tragedy. He talked about the fear he felt in that moment, about how it shook him to his core. And then he said a line that has stuck with me. He said, at times like this, where there is an inexplicable tragedy and we're flailing about, all you can do is wonder why. That in those moments when tragedy, when disaster comes out of nowhere, when life feels like it is unraveling, when the questions of life go unanswered and all you can ask is why, when you're flailing about, or desperate for something or someone to hold on to. And then Wright, he turns in the same interview, he turns and he looks at his co-host, a man known for his faith in Jesus, Chris Broussard. And he says, it made me envious of you that I didn't have that foundation. Wright says, I wish I had a foundation like you do. I wish I had something or someone to hold on to when it feels like life is falling apart. I wish I had an anchor. Hebrews 6:19, one more time. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. You see, the story of Easter is that Jesus Christ, he came to this earth, that he so loved you, that he came down, he experienced life like we do. And then on that day that we call Good Friday, he was betrayed, he was arrested, he was sentenced to death, and he was crucified. And then he was placed in a tomb. Now the followers of Jesus, man, they never saw this coming. They had put their hope, their faith in Jesus, and now they're like, here he is, lying in a tomb with this large stone rolled in front of it. But then Easter Sunday comes. Two women come to the tomb of Jesus, and here's what we see. As they approach the tomb, Matthew chapter 28, verse 2, it says, there was a violent earthquake. For an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going back to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. Now, this awe-inspiring, terrifying moment. So it makes sense that the next verse says this. It says, the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. And then the 7 words that would change all of human history. He is not here. He has risen. You see, that death, despair, loss, suffering, they never have the final word. And yes, as Jesus said, in this world there will be trouble, there will be crisis, there will come disasters to us. But I love what Tim Keller says. He says the worst thing is never the last thing. That trouble never gets the final word. That there is a person who we can put our hope in. A person who experienced love and loss. A person who even experienced death. And yet the worst thing is never the last thing. Because on Easter Sunday, the tomb is empty. The promise of God to never leave us, to never forsake us, leaves us with a hope for our present and a hope for our future. Hebrews 6:19, one last time. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. There is one person who we can place our hope in, that he will be an anchor for our soul, that when disaster strikes, when life is turned upside down, he will keep us firm and secure. He will be with us. He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. You see, the story of Easter is not that God will give us a perfect stress-free life. The promise of God is when hard times come, when disaster springs up out of nowhere, there is only one person we can hold on to. That there is an anchor for our soul, and his name is Jesus. And so today, as we wrap up our time together, I want to close with an opportunity for us to anchor our lives to this man, Jesus. You know, these early followers of Jesus, they were very clear on how to do this. Romans chapter 10, verse 9 says, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And I'll tell you, these same early followers, they faced trials, they faced struggles, they suffered pain and heartache through their lives, but through it all, they held on to their anchor, this firm foundation that Jesus is Lord. And so today, I want to close with a prayer. And if you're ready, you can pray along with me, and you can receive this gift, the anchor for your life. Let's pray. So God, we come before you, and on this Easter Sunday, we say thank you. We thank you that you are a good and gracious God, that when trouble strikes, when disaster comes, that there is one anchor that we can hold on to, and it's your Son, Jesus. And so today, for those of us who are brand new to faith, and we're ready to receive the gift of love and mercy that you offer, God, we just say with our mouth and believe in our heart that you are God, that you love us with an unconditional love, that you will never leave us or forsake us, that you will forgive us for every sin. For that, God, we say thank you. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen.
Run and run and run is all I've ever done, but still your grace is right beside me. Fight and fight and fight. Oh God, you know I've tried, but I can't tide these demons over. And I don't see how you can love me still. And I don't see how you can love me still. And run and run and run. Well, you pursuing love, you won't lose me when I wander. And fight and fight and fight. You gave your son to die for death that I could never pay for. And I don't see how you can love me still. And I don't see how you can love me still. And I don't see how you can love me still. I don't see how you can love me still. You threw my sin in the sea. My vice is sunk in your mercy deep. You carried my cross on Calvary. You took the nails that were meant for me. With every breath you bore the pain of all my guilt and all my shame. You paid my price on that day. You gave your life and you took my grave. I don't see how you can love me still. I don't see how you can love me still. And I don't see how you can love me still. I